everybody. I am live here in Suffolk, and I am tuned in now, typing out here. If you are live and you're watching, the comment in the chat room. So make sure in the upper right-hand corner of the of your screen, if it says signed in, then or if it says sign in, then you are not signed in. So go ahead and just sign that in. It's just your YouTube or your Gmail account or whatever email account you have. Should be fine to go. Just make sure you're doing that because I would love to get everybody in the comments to be able to blind taste these together. We are going to be tasting 4 wines, and if I just tell you my blind tasting notes, then we're not going to learn together. I need to hear back from you. So participation is really key here. So hey, Veronica and Joe from Virginia Beach. Glad you're hanging in there. Holly Cross, awesome, from Chesapeake. Chris is from Virginia Beach also. Chase, hi, from Norfolk. Jen Long, awesome. Great to see you. And Jared, or see you guys, you know what I mean. Jennifer and Maddie are here. Awesome, awesome, great. Now, while we're all just logging in and getting comfortable, I just want to make sure everybody has what they need. So if you got the blind tasting package, then I'm going to go over that. If you didn't and you're just tuned in to learn, totally fine. Don't worry about this. I do recommend you take notes on the wines that you are drinking because you will learn to become a better taster this way. But you want your blind tasting sheets here. You have a white wine sheet, a red wine sheet. Next page is the Wine 101 Basics of Tasting. You want to make sure you have that. The wine aroma chart, so that it's like a vocabulary word bank in terms of finding the words to pin down what you're actually smelling. And then lastly, the Wine 101, the classic descriptors of varieties. This is a double page sheet. Please don't actually look at that yet. That's kind of what we will use as the key to figure out our conclusions once we get to that stage, but it won't help you if you look at that in advance. So kind of leave that hidden. You should have the first white wine is the larger bottle. So each of your wines should come with a tag on it saying wine number 1, white wine number 1. This is the glass that we're gonna serve on the left. So make sure that that is the wine with the screw cap, just in case I mislabeled any of your wines, which is totally possible. Make sure that your white wine number 1, the wine that you're going to serve on the left, is the bottle with the screw cap on it. White wine number 2, I didn't scrape the label of this one, so I can't take out the bag. It has the natural cork. So white wine number 1, we're going to serve that on the left. White wine number 2, serve that on the right. So just like we read left to right, we are going to taste left to right. If you get your glasses mixed up, I can't help you because I can't go over there and smell them to put them back in order. So make sure you're careful, just like keeping your glasses left and right as we go through this tasting. For the red wine number 1 is the Bordeaux bottle. So that's not meaning that it's a Bordeaux. I'm not giving you a hint, but a classic red wine bottle that is squared off at the top like so. That is your red wine number 1. Red wine number 2 kind of has this more burgundy shaped bottle. This, again, that's not a clue on what it is. It's just more sloped on the edges. So make sure your labels are correctly on the right wines, that I didn't mess anything up. I did put these packages together while sipping on gin and tonic at like midnight. So I just want to make sure I didn't make any mistakes there. You should also have 2 glasses in front of you. If you don't, get some. It doesn't matter if they're the same. Preferably, that would be awesome. But if they're not, totally fine. We're going to make this work regardless. So we're going to serve 2 white wines side by side because you learn a little bit more about the wines when you get to taste them side by side. And same thing with the reds. So checking in now here, who else? All right, Craig and Emily, hi y'all. 757 Ghent, hello from Norfolk. Who are you, 757 Ghent? Or are you just like all of Ghent is tuned in? That would be pretty cool. Taryn from Colorado, hi Taryn and Don. They didn't get the specific wines, but I told them some similar wines that they could pick up so that they could still join in. Hi Wendy, Hammers and McCoys, awesome, great to see y'all. Portsmouth, Martha and Mark from Williamsburg. Hi, Alex. Ada Lester from just in my neighborhood in Norfolk. And Amy upstairs, awesome. They shared their blind tasting package with some neighbors, but from 6 feet away, of course. Denise and Kevin from Williamsburg, awesome. So doing the 2 whites, fabulous. Hi, Cora and Jake, great to see y'all too. The Kuchars from Williamsburg, Tawana, fabulous. Martha and, Ada and Alan's neighbor. Okay, awesome. Now I get to meet you 757 again. And Chris and Mary Bonzek from Newport News. So grateful that y'all are all tuning in. I miss you all so much. I'm an extrovert. I miss these classes, but it's still great to get some wine education in, even from far apart. I'm going to turn the camera now and say hello, Mom and Dad.
Hey, everybody.
I am tuning in from my parents' house where they have high-speed internet. So hopefully you're getting a bit of a better image than from my hotspot in Norfolk. So first, let's pour the wine. All right. So I'm going to serve my wines like this so that we don't get mixed up. My left and right, I think it's going to be backwards from yours as you watch me on screen. So white wine, number 1, again, remember that is the screw cap wine. Pour that in the glass on your left. Give yourself, 2.5, 3 ounces, totally fine. You want enough wine in your glass where you can swirl it really well and get some great aromatics out of it. It doesn't matter if you finish it all. I have a dump cup, which accurately named because I just literally dumped it all over me. Only on live camera does this stuff happen. Actually, it happens in real life in all of my classes too. But now it's forever on the internet. So it's YouTube. So white wine number 2, that is the sloped edges, the real cork one. That white wine is going to be the glass on your right. Same thing for about 3 ounces, 2.5, 3 ounces. And hopefully y'all did not look at the corks as you open this wine. I did everything in my power to get all of the clues out of the way, but things happen. And but here's the thing with blind tasting. Let me just break down the rules while these wines are warming up. The answer right. Blind tasting is all about analyzing the wine correctly. So the skill of analyzing the wine is really what we're going for. We're not going for guessing the correct variety. That's just what happens if you analyze the wine correctly. So first and foremost, our goal is always to analyze the wine correctly. So we can't do that if we know anything in advance about it, because then we start confirmation bias. We start looking for the things that we expect to see or that we think should be there. And then our brain picks up on those things, whether or not they are actually there. And that's really dangerous. And it actually inhibits your tasting as or your skills as a blind taster. So we don't want to look for any clues in terms of the bottle shape or whether or not it has a real cork or a screw cap or anything like that. All of those clues that we look for to kind of get a leg up on getting the answer right at the end actually inhibit us from developing the blind tasting skills. So I challenge you to work really hard to not jump too far ahead in terms of conclusions. Let the wine talk to you. That's the only way we're going to get better at this. If you have that instruction page, it has all that information on there. Highly recommend you follow those instructions because that is how every professional learns how to blind taste, and that's how you're going to get better. So wine on the 1, wine on the 2. We should have wine in both of our glasses now. Go ahead and pull up your white wine tasting sheet. So we have 2 different columns here if you're using these. So it says on the top here, wine number 1, glass on the left, wine number 2, glass on the right. Let's go ahead and that blank here is for when we figure out what wines are. So you don't have to fill that in yet. Let's go ahead and have that out and then have out your, this is harder to do with my papers being so wet from spilling my dump cup on it. Have your Wine 101, the basics of tasting sheet out just to get us started. So first things first, we want to look at the wine. So the sight and appearance of the wine gives us a whole lot of clues in terms of deducing what is in our glass. So if you have them both, I recommend always tasting wines side by side, two different ones side by side, because it's the comparison that gives us so much information. So if we hold them up to the light and we give them a good swirl, it's hard for me to swirl two at the same time. Before the end of this, I will spill more wine, don't worry. But if we give them a good swirl with light in the background, we're looking for clarity here. We're looking for how the light is reflected through the wine. Now, if you're like me, I have some condensation on the outside of my glass because the white wine is cold and it's the first wine in my glass. You can just use your finger, wipe it off, a napkin, something like that. So there we go, just spilled some more wine. So we're looking for the clarity, and for me, both of these wines are reflecting the light. The light is reflecting through the wines really brilliantly. So the clarity is quite clear. In terms of the color, we don't actually see color when we hold it up. Most people look at the color and they hold it up to the light. I'm picking up color from all around the room. So what you want to do is you want to hold it on its side with a white background, whether that's a paper, if you're in a restaurant, a plate, a napkin, something like that. And you want to hold it right on its side, almost completely horizontally, and look straight down through the wine. I like to use a paper that has words on it because that gives me a lot more indication of how concentrated the color is, especially when it comes to red wine. But you're going to hold it straight down, looking down through the wine. And if you do that for both of the wines side by side, you notice that the color is quite different between these. If you hold up to light, you can't really tell much difference. But holding on its side, the wines are quite different. The first wine on the left, is the definition of pale straw. Like this is very lightly pigmented, hardly any color in it at all. Slight bits of yellow maybe, but that's about it. The second wine has quite a bit more yellow tones in it. Definitely not on the yellow spectrum, but less on the pale, closer to the yellow in terms of the white wine tasting sheet, what you'd circle. So that first one, I'd circle pale, definitely. The second one, straw, maybe circle into yellow. So again, not everything fits in a very specific box. A lot of times you get wines that are right in the middle of certain categories, and that's okay. Just notice how you can annotate that on your tasting sheet. Concentration is just how deeply it is pigmented. Is there any chance you switched yours when you... Yes.
Yes, you switched yours. The one on the left.
So
the one on the left is the
this
straw.
is why I have people helping me out.
Right.
Fabulous. So I just gave you the wrong tasting notes because in the midst of trying to do this on live camera, and it's awkward and spilling wine all over myself, I switched up my glasses. So the wine on the left definitely has more of the yellow tones to it. The wine on the right, thank you, Mom. I'm so glad I have someone here tasting with me. And the wine on the right definitely has more of that pale straw. So totally apologize if you got those notes wrong and think you've already failed. Please don't think that. Just know that the pros fail all the time. Okay. And yes, Wendy McCoy, gin and tonic, yes, but I didn't actually have one before this. Maybe I should have. Maybe that would have helped out. Okay. Hi, Tony. Hi, Jenny. All right, so wine on the left should be a little bit of a deeper color than wine on the right, which is more pale in color. Now the legs are, after you swirl the wine, notice that there are drops of wine that form and fall down the inside of the glass. It's easier to focus your eyes on those legs if you look at the part of the glass that's further away from you. And what we're looking for is how slow they are to form and fall, how thick they are, how defined they are, or if they're very fast to form and fast to fall and not a whole lot of definition. I'll tell you what that means in just a second. But if you notice, the glass on the left definitely has a little bit more of those slower to form and fall legs. So that's wine number one. Wine number 2 has thinner legs, and also I have what's called a sheeting effect. That's otherwise known as like the Windex effect, where the rim is breaking apart like Windex does. So instead of the whole rim falling down in the form of legs, it's kind of all just breaking apart in terms of like droplets on the inside of the glass. Both of these glasses were just washed and polished, so it doesn't have anything to do with that. It's just, that's the effect. So what that tells us is alcohol percentage. The slower the legs are to form and fall, the higher the alcohol content, and the faster they are to form and fall or have a sheeting effect, and the thinner they are has a lower alcohol content. So already we can tell a difference in color. We can tell a difference in the legs as well. Let's get into smelling, and why I like to go through all of the site first before smelling is because as we're swirling the wine quite a bit to check out those legs and the clarity and the color and the concentration, the wine is coating the inside of the glass, and if it's a crystal glass like this, then the wine is kind of absorbed into the glass. Alcohol is evaporating just slightly, and it's releasing esters, and esters we are smelling. So it's really important to let the wines warm up quite a bit before we do that. So as we do this, this is when you want to break out that wine aroma chart. Now you don't have to use this, but I do recommend it, especially if you struggle with naming the thing that you're smelling. Like, wow, I really smell something, but I can't put my finger on it. Looking through that sheet is not supposed to put words into your mouth that, or put smells into your head that aren't already there. It's supposed to put a name to what you are smelling. So that is what it's for. It's a vocabulary word bank. Don't look through it and look for those things like, I don't know, do I smell banana and green tea and toffee? Just look and see if anything jumps out at you like, oh my word, yes, it's totally whatever that is. So go back and forth. You can do it quickly like that just to get first impressions, and then take a little bit more time with the wines and see if you can name 3 things that you're smelling. So on your tasting sheets, first of all, I like to talk about intensity as I'm smelling wine. So how intense is that nose? Is it really aromatic? Is it jumping out of the glass? Or is it super reserved, shy, and more difficult to find? Is it more subtle or more introverted, as I like to say? So you can put whatever you like to say on that, how intense the wine is. See if you can name 1 or 2 fruits that you are smelling, and then talk about the fruit condition. So a fruit condition would be like if a fruit is fresh and underripe, or maybe it is super overripe, maybe it is cooked or stewed or dried or jammy, something about the condition of the fruit, because noting that the wine has peach tells us less about the wine than thinking about it being candied peach or dried peach or peach jam or really underripe bitter peach. That's kind of the most important part. And then non-fruit, anything that you are smelling that's not actually fruit, whether it's flowers or maybe herbs, maybe it is leather, spice, smoke, tobacco, literally anything else that you can think of that's not an actual fruit. List that all in there. If you want to put extra notes of anything else that you're getting out of the wine, do so. But talk amongst yourselves if you're tasting with your household members, or texting or FaceTiming with friends or anything like that. And I'm just going to give you like 30 seconds to fully smell and tell me, please, because this is only going to be fun if you participate in the chat room, type in some of the notes that you're getting, whether it's intensity, fruit condition, non-fruit, any other note. Just go ahead and type in notes on either wine number 1 or number 2. If you're putting that in the comments, just make sure you put wine number 1 or wine on the left, and then put your notes so we know which wine you are referring to. I'm going to take some time now too. So whew. Yeah, very, very different wines so far, right? Let's see, what are y'all saying? So wine number 2, peach gummy candies. Interesting. Okay, cool. Wine number 1, unripe melon, a little rubber. Okay, fabulous. Wine number 1, petrol. Yes, tropical fruit, banana. Awesome. Small, heavy floral in the second. Okay, so a little bit more of that floral note. Rose and geranium. Interesting. Okay. Number 2 has more tropical fruit on it. Wine number 1, some oak and butter possibly. Number 1, mineral and honeysuckle, and grapefruit for wine number 1. 1 has a little bit more barnyard, some funk going on, right? Absolutely. Pineapple and apricot on wine number 2. Pear. Dawn and Beth, can you tell me which one you got the pear notes from, wine number 1 or 2? Number 1 has a little bit more banana, tropical and citrus fruit with pear. Okay, great, thank you. Wine number 2, citrus and grass. Wine number 1, strawberry. It does have like some green strawberry notes, like super green, like something I'd want to pickle and put on a salad, pickled green strawberries. Interesting. Okay, cool. I love all of this. Pineapple juice and fresh peach on wine number 2. Pear on wine number 2. Pear on wine number 1. So we have some similarities on both of these wines, right? Grapefruit, honeysuckle, and mineral on wine number 1. Caramel and wine number 2, a little bit melon. Interesting. Okay, so when I condense some things, let's first talk about intensity. I'd say definitely wine number 1 is more intense. Hopefully y'all get the same with these. Wine number 1 definitely has more aromatic, like it's jumping out of the glass a little bit more. For fruit on wine number 1, I'm getting loads of citrus, both lemon, a little bit of grapefruit, maybe some tangerine in there too, like clementine, some like sweeter and more bitter citrus notes on there, but loads of peach. Like I'm just getting loads and loads of peaches and apricot, maybe some like yellow melon in there as well. So maybe some yellow apple. Generally, just a little clue here. Any white wine, you can say apple or lemon, and every somm's going to be like, yes, absolutely. And for red wine, you can say red cherry, and absolutely, they're going to say yes, definitely for every red wine. So lemon and apple for all white wines are always safe bets. So if you say that, I'm going to make you clarify it a little bit more and go further. Wine number 2, a little bit shyer. Oh, and wine number 1, loads of that petrol, right? It smells like a little bit rubbery, like a new pool toy, or some people call it a new Barbie, but I never had the experience of having a new Barbie because I'm child number 4, and while my parents are across the table from me, I get to give them a hard time for that. So I don't know what a new Barbie smells like, but I definitely know what a garden hose smells like because I did landscaping at the age of like 5. Just kidding. But that rubbery smell is definitely there for the first wines. On the second wine, all right, so this is really embarrassing. Our second wine is a little bit corked. Not like fully corked, but it comes in all ranges. Does it smell like a little bit cardboardy to you guys? So the second wine I had just tasted right before this. I should have tasted a little bit further, but there is some slight corking in there, and I've had this wine plenty of times. I know it shouldn't smell like that. So I apologize if any of your wines are corked. I will definitely replace them. But I can get past that. It's just very, very slight amounts in there. And by that, we'll go into that on a different video. But basically, the cork itself has come in contact with chlorine somehow and created a new chemical called TCA, or trichlorous. Never remember that on the fly. And it gives that smell of like wet cardboard, newspaper thing. So I'm getting a tiny bit of that, and it can be in any range of like super, super faint to really intense. And this one is a little bit corked. So we're going to get past that. The nose is shyer on everything else on the wine. A little bit more grapefruit on this. Definitely lots of citrus on there. More apple and pear. I don't get any of the tree fruit like peaches and apricots on this one like I did the first one, and there is this like herbal component to it too. So that's my notes, but again, my wine is probably going to smell a little bit different than yours. So don't be dismayed if you're getting wines in case next time. Note for next time. All right, so let's go ahead and we're going to taste these wines now. If you have your dump cup, you are welcome to spit the wines in between. Totally fine. Saturday night, and I'm going to drink the wines. But when you taste the wine, just like we smell back and forth 1 to 2, you're going to taste the same way too, because your perception of, say, the acid in one is going to change as a result of having tasted both. So I'm going to tell you just to take your initial sips of each wine, just that first impression sip, just a small sip. Wine number 1 and wine number 2. The next sip you take, a little bit larger of a sip in your mouth. You're going to swirl it around like mouthwash a little bit. Let it warm up in your mouth and release those esters, just like you did when you were swirling the wine in the glass. We're going to do the same thing with the wine in our mouth. Immediately after you swallow, after doing that, after swishing and swirling, lean back, touch the tip of your tongue to the roof of your mouth, and breathe in. It's going to suck the air to the sides of your tongue, concentrating that airflow right where your salivary glands are, right where your jaw connects. That's going to accentuate the acid in the wine. So not necessarily pleasant when you're just drinking wine, but really important to analyze when you are analyzing wine. So let's try it for wine number 1. Whew. That has some serious acid on it, wine number 1. On a scale of 1 to 5, it might be a 10. Just kidding. It's definitely like a 4.5 or a 5 for me. Serious pucker effect, and then my mouth is just watering. So it's how much you pucker and how much your mouth is watering or salivating after doing that. So pretty darn high acid. Let's try it on wine number 2. Okay. Again, my wine number 2 might be a little bit different than yours. I get some pretty high acid, but it's definitely not as high as the first one. Tell me down there in the comment section if you agree. Let's see here. Chris says, wow. Tell me what the wow is. Okay, maybe the high acid. Okay, yes, great. High acid. Wow, definitely. Wine number 1. Holy acid. Yes. Talk about pucker factor. Yes, I love it. Michelle says, the 4 of us here in the Berg took forever to figure out how to chat. Okay, I'm sorry. The chat room is sometimes confusing on how to figure out how to get in, but I'm glad you're in now. Okay, so a little bit more flower notes. Yes, we didn't talk about that in the first one. There's definitely some floral notes on the first one, I believe. So way higher acid on the first wine than the second one. Now, interestingly enough, if you have some water, grab some water. Now try wine number 2 and then go back to try number 1, because our perception might be that wine number 2 actually has low acid in comparison to wine number 1. So cleanse your palate. Try number 2 next, then number 1 in reverse order, and see if wine number 2 actually has higher acid than we think when we don't try it right after the high acid of wine number 1. Also, if you are eating in between all of this, totally fine. This is supposed to be a fun class, but that does totally change your impression of all of these tests. So just know that. I would say do the blind taste test, then eat in between like the reds and the whites or something like that. So. Okay. After I had the water and waited for my mouth to calm down a little bit from the acid of the first one, wine number 2 does have quite a bit higher acid than originally expected or originally tasted when I tried it right after wine number 1. Let's see how wine number 1 is doing. Oh, yeah. Oh, my word. Still very high acid. Okay. So for sure, wine number 1 4.5 to 5 on the acid scale. Wine number 2, I would call this probably like a definitely lower than the last one, but definitely not technically like medium to low acid whatsoever. All right, now sweetness test. This is an interesting test because sometimes wine seems really fruity. So you might think it's sweet, even though there's not actually sugar left in the wine. And sometimes the wine is so highly acidic that you don't notice that it actually has sugar left in the wine. So to figure that out, you have to concentrate your taste buds just where the highest concentration of sweetness receptors are on your taste buds, which is right at the tip of your tongue, right here. So you're just gonna tilt the wine back, stick the tip of your tongue into the glass like so. And notice if you do that, okay, I don't get any sweetness at all on that first wine, correct? Okay, great. Let's try it on the second one. Nope, no sweetness at all on this one either. So I'd say definitely these are like 1 on a scale of 1 to 5 in terms of dry or sweet. Okay. Question here. Can your own taste buds change your reaction to the acid? Absolutely. Everybody has different levels of sensitivity to acid. First, say you're a smoker. Your taste buds are going to be not very sensitive at all to acid. Or say you're used to just eating lemons for breakfast. I don't know who you are. Then your perception is going to be much less sensitive as well. Versus if you don't really have acid in your diet on a regular basis or don't really drink acidic things on a regular basis, you're going to be highly sensitive to it. So once you find your own markers, then you can do comparisons better. So this is a marker. However you feel, wine number 1, that is highly acidic. Whether it doesn't feel highly acidic to you, notice that should be your marker. Remember that marker for what high acid wines taste like. Or if you're too sensitive to it, then notice that that isn't actually too acidic. It's just highly acidic, too acidic for you maybe, but everyone's going to have different markers on that. So great questions. So in terms of alcohol test, from a scale of 1 to 5, so wines are going to range from generally about 10% alcohol to about 15% alcohol on like both extremes. Yes, there are lower alcohol wines and higher alcohol content wines, but for the purposes of blind tasting, the varieties that we're going to be tasting from the regions that those wines come from, you don't need to worry about anything being 9% or 16%. So we're looking at 10 to 15. So after you swallow the wine, you're going to feel how far down the wine burns after you swallow. So you do actually, if you're spitting the wine, you do actually have to swallow for this part of the exercise. And you're just going to concentrate just on your esophagus. If you feel it burn the top of your throat, that's more like a 10, 11% alcohol wine. If you feel it down to your clavicles, that's more like a 14, 15% wine. So let's try both of these and see if we tell a difference, first of all, and see what that difference might be. So first wine, now remember also, if you are highly sensitive to acid, that burning that you feel might not be related to the alcohol at all. That might be acid that is, just rubbing you the wrong way, kind of literally. So this wine actually feels very on the top of my throat. So the legs were a little bit slower, leading us to think that the wine had a higher alcohol content, but I do actually feel this very high up. So I'm going to guess that this is 11, maybe 12% alcohol content. Let's try wine number 2. I definitely feel that more mid-throat here. So I definitely feel more pronounced too, that kind of like that pop, that alcohol burn almost, like middle throat, so the alcohol seems a little less integrated for this particular wine. Could also be because, this wine is slightly corked. Tell me what y'all think about this, whether one felt higher alcohol content, meaning it burns lower. So you take a tequila shot and you feel that burn down to your toes. So the lower you feel it burn, the higher the alcohol content. If you feel that burn stop higher up, That means lower the alcohol content. So tell me what differences you get out of these. So Martha, help me out here. 152.4, what does that mean? Maybe I'm reading that wrong. 1 to 5. Gotcha. Okay, gotcha. Didn't feel any burnt. Awesome, Heather. Way to go. So also people are different levels of sensitivity to alcohol burn too. So if people aren't used to really drinking at all, they're going to feel that way more intensely. My friends who really just drink bourbon, they're like, I don't feel this at all. So you're going to have different levels of sensitivity to that alcohol sensation. Also, if you've been eating right before this, that will limit your sensitivity as well. So don't be worried. Like it's probably just a matter of like eating right beforehand or something like that. Okay, number 2, definitely felt a burn. Number 1, okay, great. Awesome, same, agree with you. Fabulous. Wine number 2, more like 13%. Great, medium alcohol content. Wonderful. See a slight difference between, yes. And here's the thing. None of these wines, I'd be a bad instructor if I did wines that were totally different because that doesn't help us learn. You do wines similar side to side to learn the minute differences between wine. So none of these wines that I'm going to be doing, either the white side by side or the red side by side, are going to be drastically different because that doesn't help us learn. So we're down to a matter of just like slight differences for all of these different categories. And I did that on purpose to make us, work harder because it's Saturday night and we should all be working really hard at tasting wine. Okay, Denise says, number 2 felt higher alcohol content, awesome, but not on the real high end. Correct. Not on like the 15 scale. We're feeling this higher alcohol content in terms of like right here, 13%-ish. Okay. I think everyone is agreeing here. Fabulous. Question here. If you've been drinking before wine tasting, will that change how you perceive the burn? Absolutely. Especially if it wasn't wine or if it was very low alcohol content wine or very high alcohol content wine. So everything you've had up until you do a blind tasting will change your perceptions of the wine, which is why when I did my wine blind tasting test for my sommelier exam, it's at 8 o'clock in the morning. And this is like one of the most stressful days of my entire life. So, you're up until 1 a.m. studying, and then you're up at 5 to keep studying again. And so, of course, you're drinking coffee. And you got to brush your teeth because you're doing this test and you got to be in public. Well, coffee and brushing your teeth are like the worst things you can do for your palate. So in order to cleanse my palate before I went into this blind tasting test that's going to determine whether or not I'm a sommelier, I put, me and my parents are right here. I put champagne in a coffee mug and took that with me. I didn't drink and drive, don't worry, but I drank that in the parking lot before I went in to take the test to cleanse the palate. So it is really important to make sure that anything you had beforehand isn't affecting your palate when you're blind tasting. Yeah, drinking champagne before a blind tasting is totally what all the pros do. Okay, and yes, shots of Fireball will definitely affect your taste buds. I see that question there. All right, so let's get into the next test here. Body. Body is how heavy the wine sits on your tongue. So think if you drink skim milk, that's a really light body, like it doesn't sit heavy on your tongue, versus whole milk is going to sit really heavy on your tongue. So scale of 1 to 5, 1 being light-bodied and 5 being very full-bodied. Taste both of these wines and see which one you think sits heavier on your tongue. And it must feel like wine number 1 has the opposite of weight. It like instead of giving weight, I feel like it is lifting me up. That's how light-bodied it is. Wine number 2, definitely weightier than wine number 1, but still on the light side. So for wine number 1, I definitely say like 1 to 1.5 maybe for body. Wine number 2, I'd say like a 2.5 on the body scale for white wine. Now remember, we're comparing white wines to white wines. We're not comparing white wines to full-bodied red wines. So for white wine, definitely below the medium level, but not super, super low. So complexity is really about how many different flavors you're getting. So it's the next, oh, sorry, we missed balance. Balance is all of the different flavor profiles going on, everything that you're smelling and tasting, the alcohol, the minerality, the texture, everything about the wine. How integrated is that? If a wine is balanced, it's integrated. So all of those components are coming together to make one cohesive flavor profile. That's balance. Versus the teeter-totter of like, whoa, I definitely get all just lime zest and apple skins, or whoa, I just get oak and butter. That's kind of imbalanced wine, where one thing or two things really dominate and cover up everything else that's going on. So that's a little bit more up to your own perception, what you think about the wine. It's a little bit less subjective on that. Same thing with complexity, is those flavors that are going on. This is the balance scale. But in terms of complexity, how much is going on? Is it just two flavors that are balanced out or off kilter? Or is there loads of different things all woven together? Is it a Beethoven symphony, or is it, a TikTok video? So those are obviously two really big extremes. But complexity, while there is some objectivity to that, like objectively, this wine has more flavor profiles, you just might not like it as much. Also, complexity has nothing to do with intensity. So please don't get those two things mixed up. Often people think that if a wine isn't loud, if it's not out there, if it's not in your face, bold, smack you around a little bit, then it's not complex. There isn't anything going on. Doesn't mean there isn't anything going on. It just means that that complexity is more subtle. So don't confuse complexity with intensity when you're analyzing wines like so. So I'll let you decide complexity versus and balance on your own scale, and write any last notes. I'm going to give you a few minutes just to write last notes on this. And then when you're ready, we are going to finally pull out the classic descriptors of white varieties. What we're going to do then is we are going to take our notes and see which grape variety description best matches our notes. It is not what people think it is. People don't just, oh, this is a blah, 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 and immediately all their tasting notes confirm what they initially believed. That's a terrible blind tester. You might be accurate sometimes, but that's not actually going to make you a good blind taster. What's going to make you a good blind taster is deducing all of the notes of the wine, analyzing all of the wine, and seeing in the end which descriptor best matches your notes. So letting the wine talk to you is so important here. And if you're in between one grape variety versus the other, go to your notes. Your notes are going to tell you the answer. And the more you practice this, the better your notes are going to be at telling you this answer. So anytime I do blind tasting with people in the industry, like learning to professionally blind taste, it is always, including myself when I'm blind tasting and I'm not hosting the class, it is always our biggest problem in the professional industry of confirmation bias, of assuming we know what it is. And so even though our notes are telling us we should probably be guessing something else, because we initially thought it was this grape, we look to confirm that instead of letting our notes talk to us. So let's see here. Jennifer asks, would it be balanced complexity or something else if you get a different flavor on the first sip versus the aftertaste or the finish? That's just a wine with intrigue. So sometimes the palate confirms the nose, meaning like we taste the same things that we're smelling. Sometimes it's the opposite, where we don't taste the same things that we're smelling. Sometimes wine changes as it opens up in the glass, and sometimes the initial taste, the front of the palate, tastes totally different on the mid palate, tastes totally different on the finish. So that would be more complexity. It might be that the wine is not as balanced, but the wine definitely is probably more complex and intriguing, I'd say, or layered. And balance sometimes just comes with age. So sometimes wines that have so much tension where they're changing so much between the first taste to the last taste are just really young, youthful, vibrant wines that just haven't settled down enough to all come together and become a cohesive taste. So, and David asks, the difference between complexity and balance. So I can have a balanced wine that's simple, like, oh, great, I get some lemon, I get some apple, I get some pear. They're all coming together, they're all balanced, and it's not off kilter. There's not one flavor totally dominating the other, but it's a simple wine. Then I can have a really complex wine that's off balance, where like, wow, that grapefruit totally takes over, but there's so much else going on. You can also have a balanced wine that is complex, and obviously that is the holy grail. So balance and complexity, two different things. Sometimes they are both together, and sometimes they aren't. But that's yeah. So that is definitely the point, though, is to have something that's balanced and complex at the same time. All right, let's get down to the conclusion, the really fun part. So on the sheet here, everyone bring it out. And what you're going to do is you're going to, I promise you, both of these grape varieties are on the sheet. I'm not trying to trick you. Both of these grape varieties are also very typical for the variety they are and from the region that they were grown in. So let's start on the top. Everyone pull out that sheet here. So Chardonnay. Styles range drastically on this wine based on the winemaker and where it's from. Old World, meaning everything European, generally has loads of yellow and green apples, pear and lemon. We did get some of that on both of these wines. New World, apple, pear, tropical fruit, banana, mango, sometimes vanilla, buttercream. Saw some notes that sounded similar to that. Medium to medium plus bodied. Neither of these wines were really medium or medium plus bodied. So when it comes down to narrowing down which grape variety that we're gonna pick, it's all about choosing what fits best, the best possible answer. So sometimes it could be that grape variety, and if it's some things but not all. If it were exact matches, then anyone could blind taste and you wouldn't need to practice it regularly. Chardonnay is always dry. Both of these wines were dry. Chardonnay is medium to high acid, medium to medium high alcohol. So it's going to be up to you guys now whether or not you're going to choose Chardonnay for either wine number 1 or wine number 2. Let's go to Chenin Blanc now. So we've got apple, pear, quince, honey, floral, and lanolin. Lanolin is the sheep's wool, the wax that comes from the sheep's wool. It's a little funky, kind of smells like linen with some funk on it. And we call it Chenin Funk. Light to medium bodied, dry to off dry. Both of these wines were dry, so if there is a range, it could fit. Medium plus to high acid. We had very high acid on the very first wine. Low to medium alcohol. We had low alcohol in the first wine, not on the second. So that might be, just in terms of texture, a good option for our first wine. But we didn't really get a ton. Honey, didn't necessarily get that on the first wine either. So we're going to put a peg in Chenin Blanc for maybe the first wine. I think Chardonnay is kind of out for both of these. Chenin Blanc might be an interesting choice for wine number 1, but definitely not wine number 2. There wasn't really anything that we tasted in wine number 2 that would fit those characteristics. Pinot Grigio or Pinot Gris, same exact grape here. Green apple, lemon, honey, beeswax, honeysuckle, and a pinkish hue. Well, the Pinot Grigio, that's same grape but made in Italy or the Italian style, is going to be way more on that tart green apple side, lighter bodied, less aromatic, and higher acid. The Pinot Gris is definitely going to have more of that pinkish hue because the grape skins themselves give color to the wine. Can be very aromatic, very richer, honeyed, fuller bodied. What do y'all think here? Comment below. Should we put a peg in this for either wine number 1 or wine number 2?
Say 1.
All right.
Just a peg. Just a peg.
Pinot Grigio or Pinot Gris?
Grigio.
So my dad says we're going to put a peg in wine number 1 as a possible Pinot Grigio because it's dry, it's lighter bodied, higher alcohol content, tart, light-bodied, higher acid, that kind of thing. So, all right. Savion Blanc, grapefruit. We got grapefruit on both of these wines. Both of y'all, all of y'all, I think, commented that they were grapefruit on both of these wines. Lemon, always good for white wine. Herbal, melon, peach, herbs, and Greek notes. So far, that seems like it pegs a lot of your comments, of what you commented on wine. Well, honestly, both of these wines actually had quite a bit of those notes in terms of your comments. New World is definitely going to have more of that tropical fruit, that passion fruit, star fruit, grassy, gooseberry, asparagus thing. We didn't really get New World quality Savion Blanc, but we got some of the other Savion Blanc categories, light to medium body, dry, higher acid. So let's keep a peg in Savion Blanc, honestly, for both of these wines, just based on your comments. Because again, it's all about listening to your comments here. I like y'all all going for it already in the comments here, just nailing it down. Okay, got 3 more grapes to grow though. So next, Riesling, peach, apricot, lime, apple, jasmine, white flowers, grapefruit, beeswax, petrol. That actually fit a lot of the tasty notes that y'all gave for Riesling. Light-bodied. I'm sorry for we're talking about Riesling. So those comments actually match both of these wines as well. Quite a bit of your comments, I believe. Light-bodied, a full range of dry to sweet possible. So when you're blind tasting, please remember that Riesling is always dry, except when it is sweet. So if you are canceling out the idea that it might be Riesling because it's dry, please do not, because Riesling was always made dry until they started making it. And it was like dessert wine or dry wine. And then they started making it for the American public after World War II. And they started exporting a lot of sweet Riesling. And that's what we think of, but that's not what the world thinks of when they think of Riesling. So don't discount Riesling just because both of these wines were dry, is what I'm trying to say. Higher acid, well, that would fit number 1. And lower alcohol content might fit number 1. Viognier, that's how that's pronounced, Viognier. Floral, white, orange, tangerine, apple, lemon, and weighty. Neither of these wines were really weighty, but the other tasty notes fit into that. Medium to full-bodied, nope. Dry to off-dry. Low to medium acid, neither of these wines fit that. Low to medium alcohol. So let's just nix Viognier. It's not Viognier. Promise you that. Gewurztraminer. Floral, honeysuckle, honey, beeswax, orange, spice, lychee, peach. Outside of peach, I don't think any of those other notes were listed. Medium to medium plus bodied, nope. Low to medium acid, nope. Low to medium alcohol. Low alcohol is kind of the only thing that fits. So we're going to go ahead and nix off Viognier and Gewurztraminer. I'm going to give you a couple minutes now to make your final conclusions. Wine number 1 and wine number 2. You don't have to pick a region. Although Chris Jansowitz, I'm going to make you pick a region because you're a professional here tasting with us. So you have to pick a region as well and let us know. But go ahead and pick your final conclusion of wine number 1 and wine number 2. Neither of these wines are blended and they're from typical regions. So I'm not trying to fool you. So let's see. So far, thinking number 1 is a Savion Blanc and 2 is a Viognier. Interesting, but we discounted Viognier. Viognier is not on either of these just because it wasn't weighty enough. Viognier is pretty low acid, no matter where it's grown, and it's pretty weighty. It's pretty viscous. So texturally and structurally, neither of these wines would fit that Viognier category. Pinot Gris and Gewurztraminer, also interesting. So Gewurztraminer, though, again, is so floral. It like smells like your grandma's perfume. So we're going to nix Gewurztraminer just because it doesn't have that intense. So we're going between Savion Blanc and Pinot Grigio, it seems. Riesling for 1, Sauv Blanc for the 2nd, we say. Chenin Blanc for the 1st, Savion Blanc for the 2nd. Interesting. All right, so here's the thing. I'm just going to call you out, Beth and Don. Probably wrong, but here's the thing about blind tasting. Whatever you say it with confidence. Don't guess. Don't be like, do I smell green apple? And like make your voice go up at the end. No, just say, I smell green apple. Or if you think it's Savion Blanc, it's Savion Blanc. Don't say it's Savion Blanc. Just say it with confidence. It's the only way you're going to get better. Don't say it with a question mark. So own it. That's how we do. So wine number 1 from Alsace. Interesting. All right, Chris, what grape is it though? Tawana. Wine number 2 is Gewurztraminer. Again, we're going to nix Viognier and Gewurztraminer for both of these just because it doesn't have that textural component, that floral component that would be. All right, so
we're voting.
All right, so I'm gonna tell you what my parents are voting. I promise they didn't see the wines and they did not cheat.
We're voting for. We're thinking that the first one is a Savion Blanc, and the second one's a Pinot Grigio.
Okay, so parents say, are you agreeing, Mom?
Agree. I think
First one might be a Riesling.
Well, it could be a Riesling.
Okay.
That's what we said.
So
Petrol
first
in the
one, my parents are in between Riesling and Savion Blanc.
Mhm.
My mom says Riesling, my dad says Savion Blanc. We'll fight about it later. It's okay. Second one, you're saying Pinot Grigio? It's a tart style Pinot Grigio, okay? Do you disagree?
It could be a soft one.
And so my dad says Pinot Grigio, my mom says
She
Savion Blanc.
agreed with me earlier.
Okay, I like it. I like the disagreement. That's honestly where it gets really fun. All right, so let's see. Riesling and unknown. Sorry, Steve, I agree with Trina. That's what Karen says. All right. Tony says Riesling and Savion Blanc. I'm guessing that's in order 1 to 2. Okay. Beth says, yes, ma'am. I like it. Just own that. By the time we get to the red wines, we're going to own it. So let's do the review, the reveal. This is the first wine. I don't have a label to show you. Unfortunately, I didn't bring a wine with the label. First wine is a Riesling. It is a dry Riesling. And here's what would make me pick Riesling out of anything else from this tasting is all of the obviously super, super high acid, that petrol-y note and the peach note with that tiny hint of grapefruit. That's always a signifier to Riesling for me. There's very few other grape varieties that have that intensity of petrol note, that rubber that Riesling does. So great pick, Mom. Mom wins double points tonight. Second wine.
She changed her mind.
Oh, yes. You are allowed to change your mind, for sure. Second wine, if anyone wants to change your answer, do so now because I am revealing in 3, 2, 1. Second wine is a Savion Blanc. It is from the Puy-Fumé region of the Loire Valley of France. So most people think of Savion Blanc and they think of New Zealand. That's super grassy, super grapefruity, passion fruity, cat's pee on a gooseberry bush kind of thing. But in France, it definitely does not have that taste profile. It has this taste profile. Hints of grapefruit, a little bit of herbaceousness, high levels of minerality, and this wine just happened to be slightly corked. So hopefully y'all's wasn't, and hopefully you got some of those tasty notes. The key for Savion Blanc is to know how French Savion Blanc. Same thing with Riesling, to know what dry Riesling tastes like versus sweet Riesling. So those are the things that come with practice, and we got nothing else to do until, middle of summer probably. So we're going to practice a whole lot. Great job, y'all. Please do not be dismayed if you didn't pick the right variety, because again, it is not about picking the right variety. It's about analyzing the wine correctly, and it's about practicing that. So if you're super far off, don't worry. We're just practicing. You know where you're starting from, and now you're learning all of these markers. So we're going to be doing this pretty regularly now, and we're just going to get better. So definitely don't worry. I'm actually not a great blind taster anymore because I don't get to do it very often. I'm always like hosting it. I'm rarely getting to have wines just poured for me where I get to blind taste, unless I go to Tony's house. He always has wines for me to blind taste. Just it's all about practice. Your brain is learning a new language. So, great question. Why not Chenin Blanc? So, Dave, are you asking for wine number 1 or wine number 2, or maybe both? And yes, great job, Tony. Awesome. So Chenin Blanc, I'll just say, Chenin Blanc to me always has huge notes of pear. I personally did not get a whole lot of pear on either of these wines, but Chenin Blanc is always about lemon, apple, and pear. This floral note, sometimes with some like honeyed characteristic, and that lanolin, that Chenin funk, which I didn't get. I got petrol funk, but I didn't get, and I got cork funk, but I didn't get that Chenin funk, that lanolin, that sheep's wool wax. So That's just, but honestly, great calls. I don't think anyone was super far off. And y'all had great tasting notes. So we are going to taste through the reds now. Yes, yeah. Let's make sure your wine's just pour out the leftover wine, no issue whatsoever. We're going to red wine, no problem. Again, red wine number 1 that's going to be served on your left is going to be the more squared off top. So if I mislabeled your wines, just make sure you have it correctly. Red wine number 2 is going to be the more sloped bottle right here. So go ahead and pour left and right. We're going to work through this faster. The first time you do a blind tasting, the first round, because you usually taste it in rounds, is always really slow because every little step is explained. But now that y'all know what we're doing, we're going to do it a little bit faster. I promise we'll be out by 8:30. Cleanse your palate in between, and you don't have to have food to do that. A bit of water is fine. Just make sure you swish the water all around your mouth so that the acids of the last wines are not affecting the red wines. All right, so go ahead and pick out your red wine tasting sheets. You can keep the basics of tasting sheet open. Make sure you cover up though. You're no longer looking at the classic variety descriptor because, again, you don't want to start forcing yourself into confirmation bias by looking at that in advance. So have your wine aroma chart out, your red wine tasting sheet out, and the basics of tasting. So same thing with these wines. We're going to hold them up to the light, give them some good swirls. You're going to look at the clarity of both of these wines. So just initial impression, I am getting a lot more clarity on wine number 2, the red wine on the right. Wine number 1 is definitely a little bit hazier, a little bit cloudier, just indicates that the wine is unfiltered. No problem there, it's just unfiltered, just a choice that the winemaker makes. Let's wait for those legs to happen. Oh, and you can also tell wine number 1, there's quite a bit of little bits. It looks like kind of sand throughout the glass, kind of on the edge of the that is another indication that the wine is definitely unfiltered. So there is some sediment there hanging out. So let's wait for those legs to happen. Much easier to find red wine legs because it has pigment to it. And the second round is always great because your wine has already been, the glass has already been coated with wine. I'm actually seeing slower legs, the wine on the left, than I do have on the wine on the right. So about this super slow, especially if you wait for the second round of legs for the red wine on wine number 1. Very, very, very slow to form legs on the left. And I'm getting the second round of legs on the wine on the right, but they are thinner and they are faster to form and faster to fall. By the way, alcohol content on the last wines. The white wine, the dry Riesling was 12%, and the Savion Blanc, I believe, was right at 14.5%. Oh my gosh, yeah, that would make that higher alcohol content burn. So, forgot to talk about that. All right, so color. Hold the wines both on the side and see if you can read through them. So this is going to tell us concentration. The color, you can tell real different color here. Wine on the left, way more red color. That's the definition of red. It looks like blood red color. Wine on the right definitely has a more of a purplish hue. It definitely has some bluish tints to it. Wine on the left, I can read through. I have really brilliant lighting in here. Wine on the right, I can, but it's very concentrated. I can read through it because I have a fluorescent lamp right above me for this video. Outside of that, I don't know if I can really read through the wine on the right. So a little bit deeper concentration, wine on the right. than we do have on the left, and very different color. So if you're wondering, by the way, neither of these is garnet. Garnet is that brownish hue, that brickish hue that has like tawny rim color. Some grape varieties express that, and older wine expresses that. Garnet is a terrible descriptor that we use because most of us think of garnet, if we're not in the wine world, as like ruby red, as like the gem or the stone. Garnet in the wine world means like it's brownish in color. Neither of those wines fit that. So I say for the first, definitely ruby, sorry. And the second one, definitely more of that purple hue. Concentration, medium on wine number 1, and medium plus to high on wine number 2. Legs, in terms of 1 to 5, I'd say the first wine is about like 4, and the second wine, or maybe 4.5, and the third one, I'm so sorry. First red wine from like 4 to 4.5 legs out of 5, and the second red wine, 3.5 to 4, I'd say, just slightly under. Let's get our noses in there. I'm going to give you some time. You know the drill now. So just start typing in as soon as you smell anything, whether it's the intensity, fruit condition, or non-fruit. Just type anything that you're getting out of this wine. Ooh. Just got to wine number 2, obviously. Wow. All right. So if you're wondering what a bit of Brettanomyces smells like, wine number 2 is it. So on your wine aroma chart, go under the far right-hand side where it says biological, underneath animal, horsey, barnyard, manure, all of those kind of things. That's Brettanomyces, or Brett for short. And that's literally just a fungus that grows in the cellars where the wine is aged, and it affects the smell of the wine. Don't worry, it doesn't taste like manure. It's just a smell of the wine, and that is some Brettanomyces. I think it's really lovely, but it's definitely an acquired taste. Wine number 1 has none of that. Straight up fruit and non-fruit, none of that barnyard funk. Let's see what y'all are getting here. Oak and smoke on wine number 1. Fabulous. Yes, we are getting some oak on that. Some of that like vanilla, that spice, that clove, those spicy notes that come from the oak, and some smoky notes to it. I like it. Black pepper also for number 2. Fabulous. What else are we getting here, y'all? Mom, what are you getting on wine number 1?
Blackberry.
Blackberry. Okay, fabulous. Papa, what are you getting on wine number 2?
Can't get over the funk.
So he can't get over the funk. It does take some time to get over the funk. And so if you are stuck smelling a wine and you can't get over one note, whether it's the grapefruit of New Zealand Savion Blanc or the funk of this wine, I recommend doing 2 different things. First, smell the wine in a long, slow inhale through your nose. That way your nose gets saturated with one smell, and then slowly other smells start to open up. Get a little more of the fruit and flowers.
Yeah, put more plums,
great. Okay, plum. Fabulous. You can also sometimes just go back nostril to nostril and see how the wine changes. So if you're ever stuck on one note and can't get past it, there's just different techniques of inhaling as you smell the wine to get past that one note and to open up other things. So awesome. Number 1, leather, definitely. Number 2, dark berries and pepper. Yes. Tobacco and black tea. Number 2, great. Whiskey for number 1, and that is the smell of oak. So whiskey is aged in oak. So our wines and that vanilla characteristic comes across in both whiskey and in wine. So stone fruit, awesome, like plums and currants, definitely. Leather on 2, great. So we've got leather on both of these wines. Dried plums, we've got plums on both of these wines too. Leather on the first and licorice on the second, great. What about floral notes, herbaceous notes, or let's see here, or earthy notes, anything specifically on those? Wow, I mean, this The second wine is totally opened up past that barnyard to me now. I'm getting lots of floral notes on the second wine. Like dried rotting flowers. So it's still funky, but it's definitely like you know, a bouquet of flowers that you just didn't take out of the vase for a long time and they started getting, you know, yeah. Yes. Man, but that first one is so bright and like red cherries, red everything, red currants, red plums, red cherries. I get some smoke, like definitely the smoke of the leather in there for sure, but it's so much more red versus the second one is more like black and purple fruit. All right, cool. Let's taste the wine because again, we're going to go a little bit faster on this one. You know how to do the acid test. You know how to do the sweetness test. Tannins is the only thing we didn't do for the white wine. And tannins, you're going to swish the wine around in your mouth. You're going to push it up into the front part of your gums. Right here, let it hang out for a little bit. Release the wine, not out, but back into your mouth unless you have a spit cup in front of you. And then you're going to feel that cotton ball effect, that drying sensation in the front of your gums where your lips are, and the higher degree of that cotton ball effect, that drying sensation, the higher the tannins. Now, tannins is a polymer. It's a long-chain polymer. It acts as an astringent, so it sucks up the moisture from around you, which is why it feels dry in your mouth. Now, tannins come from the skin of the grape, the seed of the grape, and also the oak that the wine was aged in. So if you get a lot more of that drying sensation in just your gums, like just like where you'd water pick around your teeth, then that might be an indication that those tannins come more from the oak than the grape. If you get those tannins, that drying sensation all around like your lips and your cheeks, generally that's an indication that those are tannins coming from the grape itself. So some grapes have higher levels of tannins than others. So you can have a low tannin grape like Grenache that's aged in oak. So it's going to have higher tannins. You're going to feel those tannins differently in your mouth. Versus Cabernet is a very high tannin grape that's also aged in oak. So you're going to have tannins both in the gums and your cheeks. Not 100% of the case all the time, because again, otherwise we would need to practice blind tasting skills. But that's about tannins. So notice where you feel that drying sensation. Alcohol, same thing, but generally for reds, you're going to start feeling it mid-throat down to your clavicles. So we're starting at the 12.5%, 13% down to that 15% here. So you're not going to feel anything higher up than that. Body, balance, complexity, all the same. So taste through the wines, try and push yourself to go a little bit faster just to hone that skill a little bit more, and let's get into this.
Low alcohol.
Whew. Acid on the first one again, man. I just, I do love high acid wines, but definitely get a lot of acid on that first one. Lower acid, but alcohol on that second wine. Oh man, that is an intense second wine. Does anyone have steak? I'll come over and I'll like eat it in your driveway from 6 feet apart because I want that now with these two reds. All right, do the sweetness test. Ain't no sweetness in that wine. Definitely no sweetness on the other one. Definitely like more fruit forward and like softer on the second wine, on just the tip of my tongue, but definitely still no sweetness. Let's see what we got here so far. So yes, I love that flavored tobacco, like pipe tobacco, rosemary and thyme, definitely all of those herbs. Artichokes smell funky when they're boiled with garlic cloves. Yes, that is true. Is that what you're smelling in this wine though, Craig? Please do elaborate. The second wine, a bit herby, definitely awesome. Definitely all of those herbs on the second wine and all of those flowers are coming out now. And the first one just keeps getting more red, more bright and lifted. So holy tannin, yes. Tannin 10 on number 1. I'm about to actually do the tannin test now. High acid on this one. Okay, great. So sometimes it just takes like doing the acid test several times and like warming up your salivary glands to get the acid test correct. So awesome, great. Taryn, I'll be in Colorado in 3 months for that pot roast. So all right, let's do the tannin test. Push that wine up into your gums. Kind of gotta let it hang out there. And again, we're accentuating not so pleasant things in wine. So people think that they don't like wine that they taste when they're doing blind tasting like this, but that's not how you drink wine, right? Like nobody drinks wine like this. You just analyze wine like this. So you don't have to accentuate the acid and the tannins in your wines the same way when you're just drinking versus when you're blind tasting. Oh my word. I can't even talk now. Mm-hmm. All right. So I'm getting most of my tannins actually all around my gums. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There is some in my lips, but definitely on the first wine, mm-hmm. It's gum tannins for sure, which indicates, as we smelled, a lot of oak aging on this wine. Let's try for the second one. Actually, less tannins on the second wine, and I hardly get any in my gums. I mean, in my cheeks, it's all in my gums. So that would indicate that the tannins are definitely only coming from the, not only, but definitely majority coming from the oak that the wine was aged in. But definitely softer tannins. So, don't worry, Chase. You didn't do great at your blind tasting because you're not tasting the same wines as us. So that's why you didn't do great at this blind tasting. So don't worry. Next time, if you have the exact same wines, you'll be fine. I promise. We're all just tasting one wine and you're tasting different wines. So like smelling funky feet. Yes, the second wine definitely smells like, again, hard to move my lips right now because of all those tannins. It smells like cheese a little bit, some really good cheese. So, okay. So tannins for number 1, definitely on like a 4, 4.5. For number 2, I'd say more like 3, 3.5. They might actually seem higher had we not tasted them after number 1. Just like the acid in the white wines, the acid in the second white wine seemed lower because we tasted it after the first one. But that's what I would say. Body, let's talk about the texture of these wines. Which one was fuller bodied and weightier versus lighter?
I got the same for the body.
Get past the tannins.
Yeah, if you're trying to get past the tannins, take a sip of water, rehydrate your mouth, give something else for those tannins to grip onto. I think the first one is a little bit longer, kind of gives this like weightier, more like velvety texture and weight on my tongue. All right, so about balance. Balance and complexity. Y'all tell me what you're getting out of these wines. So, okay, we're gonna ignore that guy. Let's tell me about the balance of wine number 1. Did you think that everything was kind of balanced and cohesive and pulled together, or was it totally off balance and off kilter? I need some more wine. This is the first one. If you want to listen.
I could do those too.
So wine number 1, Dave says, yes, balanced. Wine number 1, not as balanced or complex as number 2. Interesting. Okay. So wine number 1, the acid dominates. Now, if you think acid or tannins are too domineering on either of these wines, take another sip and just drink like a normal human being, not swishing around your mouth like mouthwash, and just see how that changes your perception of the wine too. So wine number 2, more balanced. I would definitely, I would say to me, wine number 1 seems more balanced but less complex. Wine number 2 seems more complex but less balanced because that funk is domineering. And to me, wine number 1 seems balanced because all of the things, the components of it, both structure and fruit, were like lifted and bright. So it wasn't too many different components trying to compete for attention. It seemed very streamlined in what they were going for. Wine number 2, got like the finish is over here, but the smell is over here, but the fruit is over here and the herbs are over here. Totally, totally different. All these things kind of seem a little bit more competing, but there's, to me, a little bit more going on. That's just my own personal thing. This is where it really does get truly subjective in terms of your own notes. So wine number 2 in thinking taxes. Oh, W2, gotcha, W2, thinking taxes. Yeah, at least we don't have to do this for another couple months. Number 2, complex, awesome. It's real fun, awesome, great, fabulous. All right, so let's get to the conclusions. We got 8 minutes to finish the conclusions. So on the back, this is where red wine is actually lots easier to blind taste than white wine because you basically are broken down into 3 categories. Number 1, thin skin varieties. You can easily read through those. So as you hold the wine on its side, no problem whatsoever, you can read through those. Neither of these wines are that. Medium skin varieties, you can read through it, but not necessarily easily. And thick skin grape varieties, can barely read through it at all. Sometimes not even with like a strobe light. So we're definitely going to scratch off Pinot Noir, Gamay, Nebbiolo, and Sangiovese. This is where I won't guide you anymore. You have now learned some of the skills of blind tasting. So look through some of these classic descriptors of these grape varieties and see if either wine number 1 or number 2 matches anything on this list here. So I'm going to give y'all some time. Once you figure out your notes, you can type it in the comment box. So quiet here. I feel like I should be doing the Jeopardy theme song now. Do, 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 do. Let's talk about what we can nail, like cross off, just like we crossed off some of the reds. Let's cross off Cabernet Franc. Great.
No green pepper.
We got no green pepper, raspberries, really, cocoa powder, anything on either of these wines. Great. Let's cross off Cabernet Franc. Neither of these wines are Cabernet Franc. Anything else that y'all want to cross off? Let's see what we, so number 1, we're guessing Tempranillo. Number 2, Veronica, it just says ... I can't figure out how to see your note there. Oh, number 2, Merlot. Gotcha. Okay. That's what we're guessing. Well, number 1 might be Zinfandel, might be Cab, might be Shiraz. Okay. Merlot, man, we are all over the map. All right, so I'm going to give you a hint. Wine number 1 is definitely a medium-skinned grape variety. So it's not Cabernet or Shiraz. It's not any of the thin-skinned grape varieties, and it's not Cabernet Franc. So that nails it down to Merlot, Malbec, Zinfandel, or Tempranillo. My parents are both screaming at me, Merlot. So cherry, plum, chocolate, bay leaf, vanilla, black tea leaves. Okay, we definitely got a lot of those cherries. We got some herbaceousness, some vanilla. We got medium to high tannins, definitely. Medium acid, though. Medium to high alcohol, yes. So it's like an 80% there. Maybe Tempranillo, they say. Okay, so let's see Tempranillo. Range of styles, and Tempranillo is difficult because it's so versatile in terms of what the winemaker wants to do with it. Blackberry, black red cherry, black red plum, smoke, spice, black pepper, leather, woodsy, medium to full-bodied, medium to plus tannins, medium plus acid. That could work too. Malbec, we didn't really get any of the gaminess, that smoked meats thing, that magenta hue. We got all red. So let's cross off Malbec. So I'm between, I would say that if you guessed Merlot, Zinfandel, or Tempranillo on the first one, red wine number 1, then you're doing great. For the second one, let's see, so far we're guessing, let's see here, Syrah, Cab Sauv,
Only 2 options.
well, I didn't say the second one was necessarily a thick-skinned grape variety. It's definitely thicker, but some of these can be thicker. But all right, I'm just going to tell you now. Wine number 2, thick-skinned grape variety. So it's between Cabernet or Shiraz. So look through those notes and see which one accurately matches up your tasting notes and tell me what you think. Is wine number 2 Cabernet or Shiraz?
Mm-hmm.
All right, y'all ready for this? Wine number 1. That's not wine number 1. Wine number 1. We are drinking 100% now, or otherwise known as Tempranillo. They just call it Tintafino there. It was aged in oak, and we've got some American oak on there, and it's new. Thus, those grippy, heavy, rich tannins. Tempranillo, again, is super difficult. I struggle with blind tasting Tempranillo because it's so versatile and it changes so drastically in terms of how the winemaker wants to portray the grape. So, again, I think guessing Merlot, Malbec, or Tempranillo, any 3 of those, or Zinfandel, sorry, Merlot, Zinfandel, or Tempranillo. Those would be the 3 grapes that would most accurately depict this wine that would give you like full scores because you analyzed the wine correctly. And I just love that wine. There's very little of it less because I used a Corven to drink it throughout this week because it was so delightful. Wine number 2. So we're between Cabernet and Syrah. What did y'all say? Shiraz. All right, most people are going for Shiraz or Syrah. Fabulous. Same grape, just called differently in different regions, and you are correct. This is 100% Syrah from the northern Rhone region of France. It does have a bit of oak aging on it in like large barrels, but it's also some cement in there too. And it is very classic French Syrah with that funkiness, that barnyardiness, that that a little bit of more like gamey notes and that purple hue. So if you're ever confused between Cabernet and Syrah, and you know it's a thick-skinned grape variety from the concentration, the key is the purple hue of Syrah versus Cabernet generally always has a little bit more reddish hue to it. Also, the tannins in Cabernet are going to be in your gums and your cheeks versus Syrah, tannins tend to just hang out in your tongue. So your gums. I've been trying to spit wine, but it's been difficult because these wines are delicious. So those tannins from the Syrah are going to hang out in your gums more than your cheeks versus Cabernet is both. That's kind of how I distinguish when I'm blind tasting between Cabernet or Syrah. I hope y'all had a good time analyzing some wine. Now is when you get to just drink wine and not think about it too much. And so try it with whatever cheese or charcuterie you have in your fridge or leftovers, but enjoy it. Talk about it. We're going to be doing this again in 2 weeks' time. So next week, we're going to do a wine class, but we're not going to do it blind. We're going to do 2 south of France reds and 2 northern Italian whites that are going to be interesting and great springtime red wines. So if you're interested in that, make sure you're on my email distribution list. You get the notes for that, and you can order the wines and have it delivered to your house before next Saturday's class. I hope y'all are all surviving this social distancing all right. If there's anything I can do to make your life easier by delivering wine to you, then let me know. And make sure to just email me and let me know what you thought about these wines. I will email you all who bought the wines to let you know what wines exactly we're tasting, so you have the notes on those. Thank you so much for tuning in. I look forward to seeing you again. And until then, cheers.